Hello there and welcome. This is Jennifer and I'm so glad you're here. Now today I am sharing with you a new way to add foil to your cards. Now there are lots of great ways to do foiling and I've shared many videos in the past. I will link to my playlist up here on the top right. But today is something new and it does not require a special foiling machine. And it gives really good results. It gives flawless results every time. I will also be sharing many techniques that you can do with any foiled surface. These include adding stamping, inking, and stenciling. So stay tuned, we got a lot to share. Let's get started with this new way to foil, and that is with the new Gina K Designs Poly-Glaze foiling sheets. These are sheets that are printed with a Poly-Glaze coating. It's kind of a white, light gray printing on white cardstock that allows you to do foiling, and it foils very flawlessly and you don't have any like black spots left over or areas that don't foil. There are many prints available and I believe there's 20 sheets in a pack. Here I'm showing you the different Poly-Glaze packs available, the different types of prints, and I will demonstrate many of them throughout this video. I really like that these are printed on a very smooth white cardstock that allows you to easily ink blend or stencil or stamp on top of the foiling. Again, I'll be showing lots of that. These last two Poly-Glaze foiling sheet packs actually coordinate with the new Gina K Designs card kit, which I'll be showing you in a bit also. These Poly-Glaze sheets are compatible with the Thermoweb Deco foil line. The Deco foil line includes lots of beautiful foils meant for transferring with a laminator. Now, here are a few different options here. These do include the Gina K Fancy foils, which have lots of beautiful options. These are very inexpensive. They come in the sheets, as you see here, and in rolls. There are many ways to use these Deco foils, and I've done many videos in the past, and these work very well with the new Poly-Glaze foiling sheets that I'm using today. Now, please note that these Thermoweb Deco foils and fancy foils are different than the Glimmer foils that I use with the Glimmer foiling machine. So over here on the right, I have the Glimmer foils. These are meant to be used with a foiling machine, such as the Glimmer foil machine. That's very different than the Deco foils we're using today. I will show you a bonus idea later where you can use the Glimmer foils over on the right with the Poly-Glaze foil sheets. But in general, you want to use the Deco foils that are over there on the left from Thermoweb. I will have all of this linked below. To use the Poly-Glaze foiling sheets from Gina K, you do need a laminator of some sort. There are two that I recommend, and one is the Royal Sovereign laminator that you see here, but you could definitely try this with whatever laminating machine you may have. You will need a carrier sheet that you fold in half. Parchment paper works great for this, and many of the Deco foils come with these parchment papers, or you can just use what you use in the kitchen. I will show you another option in a moment. I have a Poly-Glaze foil sheet here, and I'm taking a piece of the Deco foil and laying it on top. This is the basic gold foil. I'm putting that in the folded parchment paper and then running it through my Royal Sovereign laminator. This is nice and hot. I let it heat up for about 10 minutes, and I'll let this run through. As it runs through, that heat and pressure will force that foil to stick to the Poly-Glaze that's on that cardstock, that Poly-Glaze coating, and you will get beautiful results. Now, this is a basic laminator here. I recommend having a laminator in your craft room for many different techniques and for storage and organization reasons. This is just another reason to have one. Once that goes through, watch this. We'll peel the foil off and look at that flawless, beautiful, smooth foil that doesn't scratch off. So this is the catch a wave pattern, and you can see the detail that we get, and we don't have any areas that skipped foiling. I can also use that leftover foil piece again on another project. If you do not have parchment paper, you can also take a thin sheet of printer paper or copy paper, fold that over, and put your Poly-Glaze sheet and the foil on top of that, into the folded piece and run that through your laminator. So yes, you can use printer paper for this. You don't have to have parchment. And here I'll show you the beautiful foiling result that you get. Again, this is Deco foil with the Poly-Glaze foiling sheets. Let's do our first card and our first technique. This shows how to use a stencil over a foiled background. You could do any foiled background here, but I'll be using those Poly-Glaze foiling sheets. Because I wanted a lot of sparkle to my foil, I'm using the Gina K Sparkling Silver Fancy Foil. This is a Deco foil that has a lot of sparkle to it. You can see it in the foil there. If you prefer a traditional foil, you could definitely use that, and I'll demonstrate that later. Into a folded piece of printer paper, I'm putting my Poly-Glaze foiling sheet along with the foil on top, and then I'll run that through my laminator. I will demonstrate another machine later in this video. After it runs through, I can peel off the foil and look at this beautiful result. Super sparkly, and it has like this glittery look to it because of the foil that I chose. By the way, this is the Gina K Art Deco Poly-Glaze foiling sheet, and that leftover foil piece we could save and use on another project. Now, along with this foiled background, I'll be using the new Gina K Designs Lovely Notes card kit. I really like her card kits because they're packed full of a lot of great products. Here we have 2 large 6x8 stamp sets, along with the coordinating dies for both. And we have a layering stencil set and lots of dies. You can see the 2 different love words, you, and the large kind of lace looking heart. Again, these do have coordinating dies for the 2 stamp sets. And for that stamp set on the left that has lots of sentiments, there are coordinating dies for each, which I'm really excited about. You'll see me use all of these products except for a few of the dies in this video. What I like most about the Gina K card kits is everything is reusable. You can use these over and over again to create many cards. On my first couple of cards, I'll be using the layered peony stencils. Now, I'm going to do something that might scare you a little bit, but I promise it's okay. I'm actually cutting these stencils. Now, these stencils have different parts to them. You have the flower and the leaves. And I'm cutting those leaves off so I can use them separately. You do not have to do this by any means. It just made more sense to me to cut them off, and I'll store them together. It will be okay, but you have that option. I also have this poly-glazed foil sheet that I've already foiled just a few minutes ago using that glimmery silver foil. We're going to ink on top of this using those peony layered stencils. So I have the first stencil, and I'm putting it towards the top left corner of our foiled background. I have it on my Waffle Flower stencil mat, which is just a great surface to work on when you're inking, but you could use whatever surface you prefer. I'm taping that first layer of the peony up on the top left corner of my background using some temporary tape. I will also use some basic printer paper to mask off the other areas so I don't get ink anywhere I don't want it. I'm using Gina K Designs dye ink. This is the light orchid ink, and a Gina K blending brush. You could really use any dye ink that you want here. Dye ink I think works best, but you could also use distress inks, distress oxide inks, or pigment inks. Any blending brush or inking tool would also work. I'm applying the ink lightly over this opening. You'll notice it went down a little bit more purple than pink at first. That's because I used my purple blending brush and I should have used my pink one. So it still had some leftover purple ink on it. But that's okay, no one will ever know. I'll just come in with a little bit of this lilac ink to kind of blend some of that purple into the pink, and I'll end up with a flower that has some purples and pinks to it. I really feel like when you're using large stencils like this, it's best to use multiple colors just for more variation. Okay, after I've inked lightly over that stencil, I'll remove it. You can see our first layer is done. Now I'll come in with the second layer of the peony, line it up, tape it in place, and apply the same colors but darker. Now you could use the same ink pads if you wanted to and just apply a heavier amount of ink. But since I have darker shades of the same colors, I'm just going to use those. Gina K Designs has these orchid and lilac colors in light, medium, and dark, so you have that option to just grab the darker ink. But if you wanted to, again, you could just do a heavier amount of your first ink. So I applied those two colors on top, and look at that beautiful flower that we have, and also that lovely sparkly foil in the background. Now I have the rest of that first stencil, which is the leaves, that fit nicely up against the peony. So I'm taping that in place with some temporary tape, and I'll apply a green ink over this. In this case, I'm using the Spruce line of colors from Gina K Designs. These also come in a light, medium, and dark. This time I chose to start with the medium and put a light amount of that down. Then we will come in with the second of the stencils and apply the dark spruce ink. Again, you could use whatever brushes and whatever inks you want to use here. I find Gina K has a great selection of colors that really fills all of the rainbow, and they blend very nicely for techniques like this. I also want a bit of a leaf showing up in the top left there to kind of balance the leaves on the bottom right. So I'm using the same leaf stencils. They don't really fit very well up there on the top left, but I made them fit. No one will ever know. And over the first stencil, I'm putting that medium spruce, and over the second stencil, we'll put the light spruce. I just like that the green up in the top corner balances with the green on the bottom right. All of this inking that we put on top of the foil is resisted by the foil, so the foil still shines through and gives that great shine. Next, I wanted to cut out that center foiled area and pop it up so it stands up against the background. So I found a rectangle die that fit perfectly around that foiled area. You could also use a craft knife or a trimmer to cut this out. So I'll line that up around my foiled area, run that through my die cut machine, and then we have the frame that doesn't have any foiling, and then the center area that does. On the back of the frame, I'm putting some liquid adhesive and adding it to a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding white note card. I think I forgot to mention before that all of these Poly-Glaze foiling sheets are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, so they fit great on a card. So here I'm gluing the frame down, and I have that open area in the middle. Off screen, I added some dimension behind that foiled centerpiece and added it to the center of our card. I'll demonstrate that on our next card example. Here I used that love die that's included in the Lovely Notes card kit that I showed you earlier. I cut it from black cardstock, and I'm putting the negative space onto our card using temporary tape. This will just be a guide so that I can put liquid adhesive in the openings of the letters for love, and then I'll pop the black die cuts into those openings. I will let this dry, and then I can remove that template or the outline of the word love, and I'll have the letters perfectly straight and spaced, and I can leave those on our card. Along with the die cut word love, I used a stamp sentiment from the Gina K Designs Bunches of Love stamp set. This has a beautiful image with lots of great sentiments. I chose the word sending, and I stamped that with black ink onto a white cardstock strip, and I'm gluing that right on top of the word love. I really like to mix and match sentiments from my word sets and my stamp sets to create whatever sentiment I want for a card. So here is a look at our completed card. You can see the beautiful foil that we got using the Gina K Designs Poly-Glaze foiling sheets and Deco foil. However, this technique of applying ink over a foiled background can be done with whatever foiled background you may create, using whatever method you prefer. You can see how we got beautiful results because the foil resists the ink you put on top and still shines through. So I liked the result of this first card so much that I decided to do a second. I again have a foiled background and use the same layered peony stencil on top, but it has a completely different design. So let's do the foiling. This time I'm using the Poly-Glaze Diamonds foiling sheets from Gina K Designs along with gold Deco foil. I put those two pieces together in a folded piece of printer paper and ran it through my laminator. And look at this beautiful foiled result. I am now using the same layered stencil. This time I am again starting up in the top left corner, masking off the rest of the card using some scrap pieces of printer paper. I will again use a light color of ink and a light amount of ink over the first stencil. Now, again, you can use whatever inks you want. If you're using a non-dye ink, such as a Distress Oxide ink or a pigment ink, you'll want to wipe the stencil and ink off of the surface before you remove the stencil, just so you can be sure that no excess ink is sitting on top of the foil. But in this case, I'm using dye ink, so I don't really have to worry about it. So I'll take that first stencil layer off and now move on to the leaves that I'll have up here on the top right. I'm using a key lime ink from Gina Designs, which is a great bright green ink. However, my green brush still had some dark green ink on it. So you'll see that the ink goes down a bit heavier. I do think it's okay to use different colors of inks in the same color family with one brush. You just have to remember to brush off some of the excess ink before you switch to another color, which I forgot to do there. But it's okay, it'll still give beautiful results in the end. I have now moved the first layer of our peony stencil over to the right-hand side of our foiled background. This time I'm applying some Bubblegum Pink ink towards the top of it, and then some Peach Bellini towards the bottom of the opening. I love this peach color. Again, I'm doing a very light amount of ink, and it doesn't matter what type of blending tool you use. Finally, I'll move that same stencil to the bottom left corner and apply some Sweet Corn ink. This is a Gina K yellow ink that has a muted tone to it. It's just gorgeous. Off screen, I will also add a few more leaves like we did on the first one to complete that background. Now it's time for the second layer of the peony stencil. So I'm taping that on top of our first peony up on the top left. This time, I will use a darker shade of the color I applied over the first stencil. So this time I'm using dark orchid and dark lilac. If you don't have two ink pads of the same color, like a light and a dark, you can just do a light amount over the first stencil and a heavy amount over the second stencil. I will then move that to the second peony. Over this, I will apply a brighter pink and a brighter peach. So we have Passionate Pink and Coral Reef. Finally, we'll go to that bottom left peony. And over this, I'll put a little bit of the Coral Reef and then more of that Sweet Corn yellow and a darker wild dandelion. Now we can move on to the second layer of the leaves, which I'll add a grass green ink, which is a bit darker. Now what we're doing here is inking over a foiled background, and that foil will actually resist these inks. So you'll get a complete inked background, but you'll have that foil pattern shining through. Great for a one layer card background, but I'm going to add some dimension to this. Once again, I'm using a rectangle die to cut out the foiled area in the center. I'll line up that die, run it through my die cut machine, and we'll end up with that frame that doesn't have any foil, and then the center area that has lots of foil. I have die cut additional white cardstock pieces from the same rectangle die that I'm gluing behind it. This is how I build dimension behind that center area. I did this on the last card too. You do not need to do this if you don't want to. You could also use foam tape, but this is a great way to build up dimension and have it make it through the mail quite nicely. So I am putting adhesive around the back of the frame, and I'm gluing that onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. Then we have our layered foiled centerpiece that I'll glue right in the center of that. Again, this is just giving dimension to that center area. You could keep it flat if you prefer. The rest of this card is quite simple. I used the Love die that's included in the Gina K Designs Lovely Notes card kit that I showed you earlier. I used white cardstock for the negative space and gold foil cardstock for the letters of the word love. On top of that, I added Sending a Handmade Hug, which is included in that Lovely Notes card kit also. We have the stamp and the coordinating die. I stamped that sentiment with black ink so it would stand out. You can see here that perfect gold foiling in the background, along with that layered inking of the flowers. This is a great way to combine your stencils, foils, stamps, and dies all into one card. With this next example, I show how to do stamping over a foiled background. Again, I use the Gina K Poly-Glaze foiling sheets to do the foil, but you could use whatever foil method you want. Let's do the foiling first. I have Thermoweb and Gina K Designs Glimmering Gold Deco Foil. This is one of the foils that has lots of shimmer to it. And I have the Diamonds Poly-Glaze foiling sheets. I put those together in a folded piece of printer paper and ran it through my laminator, and look at this beautiful foiled result. Notice that there's an extra sparkle to it because I used a specialty deco foil with the extra glimmer. If you want a smooth foil result, just use a regular gold deco foil. On top of this, I'm applying Sea Glass dye ink from Gina K Designs, and I'm applying an even light layer over the whole piece. This will make it look like I did my foiling on a light pool cardstock, but really I started with white. So you can change the color of this background very easily with dye ink. Now on top of this inked and foiled background, I'll do some stamping with the Gina K Designs Filled with Sunshine stamp. This is a great stamp set, and that large leaf image is great for stamping over foil. Any kind of large image with some solid area to it would work great. So I'm stamping this first image with Lucky Clover green ink from Gina K Designs, and then I'll continue to stamp it over the entire background with different shades of green dye ink from Gina K. Again, you could use whatever dye inks you want. You could also use Distress ink and Distress Oxide ink. If you want to use pigment ink, just be sure to wipe the excess ink off of the foil areas, as it may not want to dry. However, the dye inks will dry nicely around the foil, and the foil will resist the ink that you put on top. So what we'll have is a background that is light pool colored with stamped leaves all over it and that beautiful foil shine. And once again, although I use the Poly-Glaze foiling sheets from Gina K Designs, you could do this over any foiled background. I just find these foiling sheets to be super easy to use, and you don't need a fancy foil machine for it. I did trim a little bit off of this background, and then I used the rectangle die to cut the foiled area from the center. This results in the frame piece and the center foiled area. I'll first glue that frame piece onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. I then use the same rectangle to cut 4 additional white cardstock pieces to glue behind that main foiled center piece. I'll add it right in the center, and you can see because I added those additional layers of cardstock, it pops up nicely. Once again, I'm using the Love die from the Lovely Notes card kit that I showed you at the beginning of this video. I cut it from dark green cardstock, and I'm gluing it onto a piece of solid white cardstock and trimming off the excess. That way, the inside of these letters is a solid white. This love sentiment will be glued at the top center of our note card, along with a gold glitter die cut that I created from the Gina K Designs Foliage filler die set that you see there on the top left. Now this one will get glued right on top of the O in the word love, and then I can add a small sentiment strip that says "and prayers" from the Gina K Designs Spring Tulips stamp set. That is over there on the top left. So I'm combining different die sets and stamp sets together to create the sentiment and focal point of this card. So here you can see that beautiful, shiny, sparkly foil background with the inking and stamping on top of it. Again, that's popped out in the center there, so it has some dimension. And then we added that sentiment on top of it, combining 2 different die sets and a stamp set. This is a great way to use all of your products together on one card. You've got stamps, you've got dies, you've got foiling, you've got inks, and much more. Okay, our next card is definitely the quickest to pull together. This one just involves foiling and inking to create a fun background. I am again using the Gina K Designs Art Deco Poly-Glaze foiling sheet. This time I'm using my Heidi Swap Mink machine to do the laminating. You could either use a laminator or the Mink machine. I'll talk more about the Mink machine in a moment. Here I have the Rainbow Shatter Deco foil. This is a beautiful foil and just shows how Deco foil has many different color and kind of finishes available in their foils that you can use with these Poly-Glaze foiling sheets. You'll see I also have another foiling sheet and piece of Lilac foil in there, just so I can run 2 pieces through at once to save a bit of time. So again, this is the Heidi Swapp Mink machine, which works just like the Laminator, but is even better. So here is the Poly-Glaze that I ran through with the Wild Lilac foil. I'll save that for later, but the one I'm using on this card is that Poly-Glaze Art Deco foiling sheet with that Rainbow Shatter Deco foil. Look how beautiful that is. Now it looks great with the white cardstock, but what really makes that foil stand out more is if you put black ink on top of it. This is Gina K Black Obsidian Amalgam ink, which is a great black dye ink that I use whenever I do watercoloring, Copic markers, and more. You could use whatever black ink you want here, as long as it's a dye ink or even a pigment ink. And now look how, when you make the background black, how that rainbow foil resists the black and leaves such beautiful foiled shine. You really could have applied any color of dye ink over that, but I really like that black ink in contrast with that rainbow foil. So I'm trimming the excess off of this, and then for a sentiment on this simple card, I'm using the Gina K Designs Little Hello Stencil Bundle. This includes a layering stencil set, stamp set, and dies. I'll use the Hello die, which I'll cut from white cardstock, and the Sweet Friend, which I stamped with black ink on white cardstock. I added both of those pieces onto our black foiled background, which is glued onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. This card came together very quickly thanks to that rainbow shattered foil that I used on the Poly-Glaze foiling sheet, and then the black ink that we put on top has so much shine to it, and then we have the simple white sentiments on top. Okay, now for our last card. On this one, I have foiling on the background and on the focal point florals. We'll start with the florals, but stay tuned for the background because I have a hack that allows you to get kind of this hazy foiled background that is just beautiful. But first, let's start with those foiled and stamped flowers. Now for this, I am using my Heidi Swapp Mink machine. This is a fancy laminator that gives amazing results. In my folded piece of parchment, I have put my fresh foil Poly-Glaze foiling sheets along with regular Thermoweb gold foil. I'll run this through my Heidi Swapp Mink machine. You could definitely use a laminator here, as I've shown you many times in this video. However, the Mink machine from Heidi Swapp is definitely kind of the Rolls Royce of laminators. I can use it for all of my laminating purposes in my craft room or for other things, for organizing and much more. But it also is great for foiling because it has the different heat settings. So you can make it even hotter to make sure you get even better results. So I did basic gold foiling on these florals, and now I'm going to use this stamp set that is available in the Gina K Lovely Notes kit, the kit I showed you earlier, and I'll do stamping on top of that foiling and then use the coordinating dies with it. So what's nice is you can use the stamps and dies by themselves, those come in the kit, or you can get these add-on Poly-Glaze sheets that go with it, and you could do the foiling instead of the outline stamping. I like these kind of products that can be used together or separately to give you more options, or so you can pick and choose what you feel works best for you. So now I have my foiled sheet in here. I just did the foiling, and I'm lining up the stamps that come in that Lovely Notes card kit stamp set. On top of our foiling, we'll do basic stamping using Gina K Design inks. Now you could have just stamped these kind of outline images from the stamp set if you prefer. You could gold heat emboss them for a somewhat similar look. But I will tell you that foiling gives more shine than heat embossing. If you've never seen foiling before in real life, it does have a much smoother shine. And these Poly-Glaze sheets give a smooth shine that doesn't scratch off with your fingernails, so you know it'll hold up nicely through the mail. So here I'm just stamping the first layer of these building images on top of the foil. Here I'm using green, and then for the floral images, I'll use light orchid, light lilac, and peach bellini. These are all colors I've used in this video many times, and they'll match the dark background that I'm going to show you in a moment. Now I'm taking the second layer of these images. These are very forgiving to layer. I like to refer to these as building stamps as opposed to layering stamps because you don't need to line them up just right. You just make sure that they're stamped on top of the first layer and you'll get the look that you want. It's a fun kind of modern look to these flowers. And I stamped the second layer in a darker color than we stamped the first layer in. After I've stamped all of our flowers and leaves on top of that foiling, I'll use the coordinating dies to cut them out. I definitely have more flowers and leaves than I need for this card, so I'll save my extras for future cards. Now that I have those floral images ready in the middle, let's do that background. Now, if you look closely at that background, especially over there on the right, you'll see there's kind of a hazy foil look to the entire background, along with the defined diamond pattern from the Poly-Glaze sheets. We're going to actually use these Poly-Glaze foiling sheets how they were not intended, and that is with a different type of foil. Remember at the beginning of this video, I showed how the Thermoweb Deco foils, which are on the left, are what you should use with these Poly-Glaze foiling sheets. However, I found that you can get a really cool look if you use the Spellbinders Glimmer foil. That's the one on the right here. These are meant to be used with a foil machine, not these Poly-Glaze foiling sheets. But you can get a really cool look with these foils meant for a foiling machine. So let me demonstrate. This is Spellbinders Glimmer foil. This is gold foil here. This is what you normally use with a foiling machine such as the Glimmer. But if you put it on top of one of these Poly-Glaze foiling sheets, this is a diamond one, and run it through the laminator as I've shown you many times, you will get a unique result. Not only will you get the pattern from the Poly-Glaze, but you'll get kind of a haze of foil over the entire piece. So look at this. It gives like a distressed foil look. You have the defined foil of the diamonds, right? But you also have that kind of hazy foil look over the entire background. And this is really cool when you apply ink over it. I'm first applying a heavy amount of dark lilac ink, then dark orchid ink, and then coral reef ink, overlapping these colors to make sure I get a good blend, and putting down as much color as I can to make sure that none of the white is showing through. What happens is that gold foil resists, and we'll see that diamond pattern in the center, but we'll also get that hazy look of gold foil along the background, which is something that you get when you use the wrong foil with these Poly-Glaze foiling sheets. And that wrong foil is the Spellbinders foil. So look at, you can see the definition of those diamonds, but look at the background, especially along the edges. Notice how you have that haze of gold foil that just gives that colored cardstock a shimmery look. Very unique, and it's something that you can achieve by using the wrong foil. So if you happen to have Glimmer foil, give this a try. Now for finishing off this card, I use this decorative die from the Gina Designs Master Layout 10 die set. I cut it from white cardstock, and I'm arranging my floral die cuts on top of that. These are the floral die cuts that I created using regular gold Deco foil and the Poly-Glaze Fresh Florals foiling sheets. And then we did the stamping on top. Now, after I've got my florals arranged, I have my sentiment, which I stamped with black ink. And that sentiment is from the Lovely Notes card kit from Gina Designs. And I used the coordinating die to cut it out. I love that she's offering coordinating dies for those sentiments. I'll then glue that onto our ink and foiled background, which is trimmed down and added to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. I realized I glued my background onto my note card upside down. I promised I would show more of my mistakes in my videos, and this is one I do often. I glue my cards down upside down many times, so I'm just trimming off the excess. I'll save that card backing for regular die cutting later on, and I'll glue this new trimmed down card front onto another 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card and trim off the excess. So don't worry if you make a mistake. You can almost always fix it when you're doing card making. So here is a look at the completed card. Lots of foiling on this one. Let's first talk about that background. On that background, I used the wrong kind of foil with the Poly-Glaze diamond foiling sheet. I used the Spellbinder Glimmer foil, and that results in the definition of the diamonds, but also that kind of gold haze that you can see there on that right-hand side. That little haze that gives shimmer over the entire background. It's a fun little mistake to use the wrong foil in this case. Now for the center of our card, I used the Poly-Glaze Fresh Florals, and I used the correct foil on it, which happens to be the Thermoweb Gold Deco foil. And then we did the stamping on top with dye ink and used the coordinating dies to cut them out. I also added some gold sequins here and there for a bit of extra sparkle. So I hope you enjoyed this new way to add foil to your cards, but remember that many of the techniques I showed today can be done with any foiled background. If you don't have foiling, you can do these same techniques with a gold heat embossed background. If you're interested in what I used today in this video, I have it all linked below in my YouTube description. I appreciate you watching, and I have a couple other related foiling videos if you want to check them out. We'll see you again soon with another video.